Welcome everyone. Today we have our new episode, and this is very important. It's about Alexa development as we are creating awareness to the youth communities. It's really good because they will learn the new things. And beside that, I just want to share with some of the good news because World Talent Economy Forum, we are getting a huge response from different organizations like ICC, International Chamber of Commerce, different Prime Minister office, especially from the developing nations. They are really like World Talent Economy Forum open dialogue, and they want to arrange more this kind of session. So hopefully our speakers, our board of advisors, they will be super busy next 1 year. So I will invite them again and again. Hopefully it will be very effective. So I want to start from Professor Edward. uh, how you want to analyze this Alexa development, and as it is the awareness program, if you send some industrial experience, how it works and how it will be helpful for Asia Pacific different industries, and how student can grow their skill.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Alexa because Alexa, of course, started as an Amazon project, which basically allows you to walk into your house and say, Alexa, turn off the lights, turn on the lights. Alexa, give me some music. I want to hear something. Alexa, do this, do that. Or Alexa, can you please order the food for the party I have? These kinds of things. And that sounds very nice, and it's good. But what we're really talking about is very much an expansion of these kinds of capacities. For example, right now what we're talking about is really monitoring and interacting in terms of all sorts of needs that you might have. So, for example, we now have the capacity through Alexa and so forth to, if you're low on some item in your refrigerator, you don't have to look into your refrigerator and say, oh, I'm low on this. You can set it up naturally to just order whatever the product is. And you can either pick it up at the store, or more likely it'll simply be delivered to you. And you won't even know that you were low on milk because, oh, it's there already. That sort of thing. Obviously, things like monitoring your house for temperature. We can set our thermostats, but what you might do is simply, set it in a certain way that if you want to be warmer at a certain time, or for example, you have energy use issues, and you see, and your system sees that, well, you know what, we can really save a lot of money on energy if we lower the temperature at this time to something, or we raise the temperature at this time to something. So just in talking about Alexa capacities in the household, you see how you can save money. You don't have to worry about certain issues. But then you can also see how this capacity can expand into other areas, business areas, especially. I'll mention a few more things that I think are interesting. We always have very interesting discussions on this forum, and I recommend the World Talent Economic Forum to everybody. But it really is going to be entrepreneurs in the future who figure out and offer different ways of using this technology to different audiences. For example, I don't use Alexa. I don't have to use Alexa for certain things because I'm very comfortable walking in and turning the light on when I have to and turning it off when I walk out. So that's not a big deal to me. But there might be other things that come up that an entrepreneur is going to look at and say, here's something where Ed might really be interested, or one of the others, David or Adam, might be interested. But I want to mention a couple of other long-term things that haven't been discussed a lot, but could be in the future. I read a lot about the problems with the supply chain and the problems we're having right now because not only of COVID disruptions, but from geopolitical disruptions in supply chain. And so I'm looking at, for example, in this country, we have a huge problem coming up and right now with inflation. So, for example, I like coffee. I love coffee. I live for coffee, okay? But I'm looking at the prices going up. I'm looking at supply chains. It would be nice if an artificial intelligence or a monitoring system hooked up to Alexa would notice that in the future, coffee prices are going up and we might not be able to get some of this at the store. And so it would order me a whole bunch of coffee because it's predicting these things. And by the way, in the stores here in the United States, we joke in the United States about supply shortages. We don't know what that is. We're Americans, right? But I'm seeing supply shortages in the United States for various, both COVID related and geopolitical related reasons. So you might actually have something, an intelligence hooked up to your whatever the future version of Alexa is, that monitors those sorts of things. Says, Ed, you know what? You really need to stock up on certain things, or you really need to place advanced orders for certain things, or keep an eye on certain things if you want your lifestyle to continue the way it has. Energy prices are going to be a big problem. I was just reading a piece that came out a couple of days ago about how Germany's abandonment of fossil fuels it's already been driving up energy prices. I've been tracking this for some years, and it's going to be doing even more so in the future. So my Alexa might say, Ed, you know, some of the products you're depending on and some of the services you're depending on are coming from Germany, and the German economy is not going to be in great shape in the future. So Ed, maybe you should look at changing your or diversifying your supplies here. So I can think of all sorts of cool things to do with what I call Alexa Plus, expanded Alexa. And so I have to go off in a few minutes, but I'll be interested to hear what my fellow panelists have to say about it.
Thank you, Professor Edward. We have our new panelist, Mr. Frank. So we are discussing. Can you hear me, Mr. Frank? So I want to give floor Professor David Smith, and after that, Mr. Frank, you can take your preparation and you can discuss on Alexa. Professor David Smith.
Sharif, thank you so much. I love Edward getting into this and giving examples.
Yes. One second.
I'm really bad with the smart speaker market, the intelligent assistant market. There's just so many different names you can call this that it's really there. Virtual assistants, intelligence assistants, smart speakers. But the bottom line is the market is getting very large. I'm bad. I use Siri a little bit on my phone. I don't use Google at all with their smart assistant. The Microsoft one, Karina, really flopped in the marketplace. It isn't even listed on any of the forecast charts anymore. But you see the different elements there. To me, one of the challenges with Alexa is it won't let me name my Alexa enough names on the wake names on it. So the one I have in my office is named Computer, and it just woke up.
September 30th, 2021 at 7:23 a.m.
And you can kind of get it there in the background because I used its wake up name. And what's really funny with some of the Alexa developments and stuff is that if you leave it in the default and it's in a room with, for example, a news program and they mention Alexa on it, it will wake up from that. But like I said, I'm bad. I have Alexa at home, in the office. I have it in the car. It's on my smartphone. And I use it in even different ways than Edward's talking about. One of the places I love using it is to review my schedule. And I would rather Alexa tell me of an upcoming meeting than have to rely on looking at my smart device or on the computer to see my upcoming meetings. It's just we've become so multi-digital capable that it's just there. But let's kind of go back and set the marketplace a minute. If I look at the segment where Alexa holds a major share of it, it is in the smart speaker market. And the smart speaker market last year was $7.1 billion. And it's expected to grow at a compounded annual growth rate of about 18% between now and 2025. And so it's going from 7 billion to about $16 billion during the time period we're right in. And the largest segment where Alexa holds the market share is actually in the smart home segment. And the smart home segment is really growing a lot in this period. But there's just, so many others in there too that are doing it. I almost think we need to begin to take this segment of the market with the smart speakers, the intelligent assistants, and begin dividing it down into multiple sub verticals because it has grown so fast and so much. We're now seeing TV sets with Alexa embedded into them. I now have Alexa on my dash in my car, or one of my cars, where I can speak to it in driving, and she can talk back and forth with me as we're doing that. Like I said, I even use Alexa on my iPhone because I get more intuitive answers, and it knows me better than most of my other virtual assistants. So it's one that's going, but you're in your title, you talk about development there. You're beginning to see a whole new set of tools being developed for the smart speakers. There's going to be tools developed for the smart speakers for industrial applications. So you're going to see an Alexa-like device begin to be put into manufacturing tools. You're going to begin to see it being put into medical devices. You're going to begin to see it put almost anywhere where you have to control something and get feedback from something, and it will let you then really become conversational. The development of Alexa and the Google product and the Apple Siri and all have really pushed the development of what is one of the next big breakthroughs that I see happening is conversational chat boxes, because these are the precursors of conversational chat box, the precursors of conversational avatars, where if you looked at Alexa when it came out, it came out in 2014, so not that long. To where it is today, it has gotten smarter. In the early days, the tree it would answer was very small. It expands all the time, and that's taking us to the next breakthrough where we do get to whole conversational avatars, conversational chat box, conversational virtual assistants. We're not quite there yet, but it's getting close. So, Sharif, I hope that's a fairly good overview.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Mr. Frank, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. I am sorry, I couldn't make it home in time, so I had to stop into a place here, and I'm on my mobile phone now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for joining. Actually, we are discussing on Alexa development, and we are creating awareness to the youth community, how they can use it and how they can develop their skills. Can you share your experience with our audience?
Sure. Well, in terms of not Alexa directly, but we started. I worked for a company here in southern Spain, where I am located. I worked for a company called Reuters. We were the first, actually, the first company ever outside the United States working with the voice technology development for the Google Glass Enterprise, the Explorer at that time, and then Google Glass Enterprise 1, which we have an Enterprise 2 in the market right now. But we did that job with that work with the Google Assistant in this case. So we had a first take on what it was going to happen, and now it is happening now, which is basically pervasive in all kinds of devices, from mobile devices to actually um, now we're having for example, on the third generation of smart glasses. That's my specialty. We're having these voice systems. Alexa is working in some of them. If I remember correctly, View 6 is using that on the M400 device in a couple of use cases. The experience back then, I'm talking about 2017. That was 4 years ago. Like it's like a century basically. Um, the experience was it was actually better than what it is now. It seems that it was quite faster to work with this technology back then than nowadays. It's actually strange because it actually worked faster when you were asking questions, for example, and you were doing the integration, the systems integration. It was actually going faster than what it is now. And so that's a big question right now, especially if there is an engineer, a hardware engineer. That I don't know the rest of it except Adam. If they can answer that question, because we don't know why it's going slower than it was before. But still, the use of these voice-based technology going now into, for example, biometrics, not only Alexa in this case, but going into biometrics. We have a local company here in Murcia called Biometric Box. It has turned that into a biometric marker, and actually the judicial police is deploying that technology as a way of signing over the phone, just signing off on whatever is it that if you're the deposition, or if it's something of a if you're being called by for example, by a judge or so. And there is another very interesting case using voice as a biometric marker. Sorry. The other use is, yes, COVID-19 detection. They are using that for how to detect COVID-19 from the way your voice sounds off. So that's one of the experiences we're having right now. That I have a small company working with Google, but still, Alexa is there on the sidelines right now, but as a consumer product, not as a still for us, not as an enterprise based product.
Mhm. Thank you, thank you, thank you, uh, Mr. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. uh, can you hear me okay as well?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, I have to be honest. Systems and devices like Alexa are some of the things that unfortunately do make me question my loyalty to philosophies like futurism and transhumanism. Now, I do know that when futurism, transhumanism, posthumanism, emerging tech, all these kinds of topics are discussed, people tend to fall back on the usual tropes like Brave New World and so on. And with this subject in particular, HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey is usually brought up at some point. So I'll try not to exhaust using HAL or any of those as a rebuttal or talking point. So but yes, like I said, gadgets and technologies like Alexa do indeed put me in ethics mode, and as well as shaking my espousal of transhumanism a bit, I also feel astounded how easily the general public welcome these technologies with open arms almost immediately after release. I think the wiser course of action would be to wait a while to give yourself time to see how these kinds of devices and technologies, time to observe how they are affecting people on an individual basis as well as on a societal level, how they affect people's quality of life and mental health and well-being. And because putting something like Alexa in your house, in your living room or whatever is, in my opinion, consenting to be spied on, really. Alexa is a bug, but with extra steps, essentially, and a bit bigger. So I'll try not to be too much of an alarmist, but it is, in one point of view, consenting to be bugged. But I think the incremental way technology has been introduced into public consciousness has softened the blow and made the introduction of these devices into our lives much less dramatic and troubling. I mean, I know technological growth has grown exponentially these past few decades, but you can still see an incremental pattern, a kind of dripping effect, to give members of the public time to acclimatize and to get used to it. But again, having said that, I think it would be a wiser course of action to not be a first buyer immediately when something comes out onto the market. Observe first and then decide later whether you want to participate or not. But of course, saying these kinds of things seems a bit misaligned since, as I've said before, I do have a smartphone. It's nothing strange, which has Siri on it. My lifestyle details and behavioral patterns are being fed into some analytic software somewhere. My personal data is being mined. Speaking of which, I do have a Facebook profile. But I have nothing to hide, and I want to be involved in the world. I don't want to be left behind. So I get involved. Would it make any difference whether I purchase an Alexa or not? Is there much left for analysts to learn about me, or do they have it all already? So you can be a reluctant user, stubborn and curmudgeonly user, but we still have a responsibility to warn future generations and to teach them to think critically. So this brings us back to privacy, the issue of privacy. And I firmly believe privacy is our birthright, and I don't feel like a hypocrite because I can throw my smartphone away and delete my Facebook profile at any time. Neither of those things would be easy to do because I've used these interfaces for half of my life. Not a smartphone, obviously, but social media and PCs. So my brain has adjusted to having these people prominently in the last decade and a half of my life. But we need to defend our right to privacy, which will be really compromised when we start living and resettling into smart cities, definitely. But I'm not a Luddite, but I just think let's be careful. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. Mr. Dan.
Yes, thanks again for the invite. Alexa development. Are we developing Alexa or is Alexa developing us? I think it was advertised as a smart home device, but let's look on the bright side. We can actually use Alexa to create smarter neighborhoods, smarter communities, smarter cities. Actually, Amazon enables by default on your Alexa device something called sidewalk mode, which uses some of the low energy spectrum, the Bluetooth low energy, the 900 megahertz spectrum, not to get too technical here, but it has a low energy range of about 100 feet or so. But this is interesting because your neighbor might have an A-word box. I don't want to trigger everyone's A-word box, so I won't say the A-word too much. But these two boxes can start to say, hey, I'm over here in this house and have the internet. Hey, I'm over here in this house. I have the internet. And what they can do is start sharing bandwidth. They can start actually potentially sharing information about health and safety concerns. There's a company called CareBand, which basically talks to the A-word box, and it can be used for like monitoring cognitively challenged patients, like dementia patients. There's I care for a cognitively challenged senior who at one point did wander away from home. It was kind of a spectacle trying to locate him, but all was well. He came back the next day after spending a night sleeping in the bushes, being confused, but fortunately he's doing a lot better. And so anyway, that's why I'm a 24/7, what they call eyes-on caregiver for this person. So we do want to solve problems like health and safety issues. That's why there's groups like CERT, Community Emergency Response Teams, because the emergency management people know that they can't cope in a huge, widespread catastrophe situation. So people can get trained to kind of act as an auxiliary responder function. And I'm an extra class amateur radio licensee, and that means I have all the privileges on all bands. Kind of just memorized the test. I'm not like a super technical whiz, but I really wanted to get the full privileges. But if something does go down, like the internet goes down, the power grid goes down, maybe there's an electromagnetic pulse, we could be prepared for these things. And it doesn't take much. Like, imagine making a little Faraday cage, a little copper meshed box, put your A-word box inside that, connect it to the ground plug, just the third wire that goes to the earth ground. And if there is a event like a pulse, that would burn out electronic devices, if your device is inside a box like this, the energy won't go into the microchips and fry them. It will go around them and into ground. And this actually is not an unheard of thing. There's something called a coronal mass ejection that the sun demonstrably does about every 150 years or so. The last one, I think 1859, called the Carrington event, was actually so strong you could read a newspaper at night because the northern lights were all the way at the equator, and the wires that went to telegraph offices were intercepting this magnetic energy, and the telegraph offices were exploding into flames with this, millions of volt energy. Now, if something like that happened today, which actually NASA says every year we have a 12% probability increase of another major coronal mass ejection event. Are we prepared for this? Probably not. We are going to lose our power grid, the big transformers on our power grids that step down the current from 500,000 volts down to usable voltages. Those take 2 years to build, and they're custom built. So we would have to really change to a microgrid with low voltage devices and neighborhood extension cords and things like that until we got the regular grid back online. But you know what? Maybe we would stay with a microgrid. And Alexa can help us. Sorry, I said the A word. She can help us coordinate these resilient microgrids of civilization before we need them. The old saying, "You don't miss the water till the well runs dry." Well, we got water now, and let's prepare before the well runs dry. And sidewalk mode and CERT and being smart about your infrastructure. These can all be part of the solution. So keep calm and carry on, like they used to say in merry old England during the Blitz. And I'll hand it back to you on that note.
Thank you, Mr. Dan. Professor David Smith, you are running one of the largest tech company. You are also a CTO. I have a different question because we are also nurturing and helping different startup. So my question is that, like, we are observing from USA, from Silicon Valley, especially from North America, they are like technology company, they become big brands, or they are more efficient and productive. So what is your advice? Especially we have many audience, they have their own startup. So how they can develop a good technology company, or what is the inner or secret of US actually?
Great question. The secret of really starting good startup companies is to first understand what the care abouts are around the product you want to sell. Is it just a Me Too product? Gee, that's a harder one. Are you trying to break new ground? That's hard. Are you taking and expanding up on something that's called distinctive development? There's three major development paths you have. You can have incremental development, which is more features, faster, things like that. You can have at the other extreme breakthrough or disruptive development, which is doing something entirely new that hasn't been done before. But then you can have distinctive development. And what distinctive development is doing something that's done in a different way. A good example is travel. I mean, we could walk to travel, we could ride a horse, we could take a train, we could take an airplane, or I could do a video conference. Video conferencing is a distinctive way to travel without actually traveling. And as an entrepreneur, that is actually the marketplace where you make the most money, where you have a manageable risk. Breakthrough technologies, disruptive technologies, high risk. If you do well, high payback, but usually the first to the market in a breakthrough technology doesn't end up capturing market share. It's usually the second or third that's the largest. In the Alexa development area, starting a company is going to be really neat because of how it's changing. In some of the other programs, we've talked about natural language processing. And natural language processing is part of an Alexa experience. And Dan, I use the A word too. I guess I shouldn't. But that's Dan. That's why mine in my office is named computer. But to keep getting away from that. But you begin to look at. But what's funny is we've seen smart speakers and virtual assistant and teleassistants grow, we've seen new things happening. So, for example, in the mobile app space, where voice and voice understanding is a real important part of it, uh, voice has become what's called a natural user interface, or an NUI. And these will go from everywhere from the navigation systems in cars to just everywhere. I mean, I was in Dallas this week speaking at a conference, and uh, had to go between multiple buildings. I pulled up one of my GIS apps on my phone and had my Bluetooth in, and it directed me as I was walking between all these buildings complex. Now, 10 years ago, would that happen? No. But the voice part of it is integrated with the GIS part of it, which has been enhanced by enhanced signaling of GIS to make it possible where it delivered me right to the front door. And you see those going. The other things I think really, Sharif, that gives the entrepreneur a lot of advantages in this space is that voice and this type of smart speaker integration is no longer a nice to have by users. This is a requirement that users now begin to expect. And you're seeing that going. You're seeing all this type of voice technology, smart speaker technology in healthcare. Uh, AI powered voice has been an important part of the fight against COVID. It helps screen patients, it's helped triage uh, patients. If I go to the Apple version of it, they have multiple ones that will walk patients through assessment and recommend where they go. So it's becoming close to practicing elementary medicine. Search has changed because of voice. Uh, One of the really interesting statistics in voice search is that today about 61% of all searches done on the internet are not keyed in searches, they're voice searches, where that has gone in and it's become a natural way to do it. Voice helps us create individualized experience. In one of my companies, in our holding company, it's a social emotional learning company, and we have individualized experience based on voice. And even the voice of the avatars can be changed based on individual experiences. There's another one called voice cloning, which I think is very interesting. The CEO of that company I just mentioned, we've actually digitized her voice into a conversational voice. Again, it's not reading from scripts, but it's a digitized voice. And her voice is now one of the voices that leads the students or the older persons, whoever, through the exercises to uh, enhance their social emotional learning. And so you see that. You're seeing, like I said earlier, you're seeing voice and smart displays. If I'm an entrepreneur, that's going to be a really growing market too. And you begin to see these going with them. And it's not just what we have outside of the places. Russia and China also have different smart displays. Like in China, it's called Xanadu to begin to use it. You're seeing more and more voice in the gaming industry. And there's a new term that's coming in place, which is, as I said before, if you look at the voice user interface, is now a technology that you have to add on to users' experience as you look there. So it's not just UI UX, it's UI UX and VUI as you look at how to design applications for the future. How do I design systems for the future? So it has taken its place uh, really on alongside and in growing what we would do to interact with a computer screen, like what we're doing here, interact with my mobile device like we do before, interact with my mobile devices built into my cars, my appliances, my TVs, all of that are becoming voice enabled. And, in their beginning to learn, Amazon did an update to theirs last year that has made it more cognitively aware. So in the past, if I were asking it a question like, how long do I need to steep my tea? It would come back and tell me it's between 5 and 10 minutes. But what it will do today is if I ask it, how long do I need to steep my tea? It will then come back and say, would you like me to set a timer? Because it understands if you're asking that question, you're probably going to set the timer then to do it. I love my wake up things I do with mine. It will tell me, not only wake me, but tell me the time. It will tell me what's on my calendar. It will tell me what my weather is outside. It will read through a couple of news channels. It will play BBC News for World News for me, or play ABC World News for me, and then it will come back and tell me what are my priority actions that I've set up in my Exchange folder on my computer. And all that's with me laying in bed from just telling it good morning. So, as an entrepreneur, those are the places where you address care abouts. I understand it's using voice technology in a voice interface, but think of everywhere I could apply that. I could almost put one of these on the door, have it do the voice print, have it do another authentication for me, and put my keys away. And not have to pull my smartphone out to do it with an interface like that. So the possibilities are almost unlimited if I'm an entrepreneur. And they just have to think not about just the technology, but really the places where voice has a natural interface and a natural ability to be acted upon and to provide you information back.
Thank you, Professor David, for your excellent analysis. We have a new guest, Dr. Prakash. Can you hear me, Prakash Sharma?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, like we are discussing on Alexa development. I love to know more. I think you are running an incubator. So what's going on inside India? And especially if you give us some idea about South Asian innovation and this kind of thing.
Yeah, see, there are a lot of requirements for self-support bots in India. Okay, primarily companies, they are looking out for innovations where they can minimize the interaction. No, they would want to replace a customer support executive with a bot. Okay, or an office assistant or an executive assistant for a CEO. Now the challenges, what I'll come to the challenges, what we observe when any CEO needs an assistant, and obviously a in-person assistant is preferred, because that particular person will handle each and every aspects of CEO's requirement. It could be mail communication, it could be picking up a phone call, interacting with the vendors or any party. So point of communication is plays a very important role. Now what happens is, to intelligently program any tool like Alexa, okay, to get adapted first to the culture of a particular CEO, that is going to take time. Okay, it is something where we can have these tools used for very simple interfaces. For a simple question answer session, it is going to be very useful. But just imagine if suppose a client is going to say that I'm very unhappy, your team members were not on the call yesterday, so how are we going to handle that? Because questions could be ambiguous, questions could be incomplete. So see, there is a lot of innovation and research and development needed to actually be, for having such tools usable, no, from a commercial implication point of view for business solutions. From consumer solutions perspective, yes, it can definitely help, where if suppose it is something where we have to use it for a student interface, definitely it works. Because even if you look at Google, when we have a Google Assistant today, if you start asking them questions, we tested it out. When we actually start asking questions to Google, which we can actually fool the Google Assistant. Okay, we can actually make it share some information which is not needed. Like, please entertain me. This is one simple question which we tested out. So it automatically starts showing all the favorite videos, favorite songs. But that is not the intended goal, right? So it is something where most of these tools we need very strong innovation. In fact, we need a proper corporate collaboration where a CEO volunteers. Okay, there are a couple of CEOs volunteers. Let that particular tool get trained under that CEO leadership for 6 months, and then the fine tuning will begin. Because adapting a general kind of generalization of a bot, no, that is not possible for CEOs. That is what I want to say. And this is where the innovations will come in. Yeah, Sharif? Hello, your voice is not coming.
Sharif, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Mr. Frank, sorry about that.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. What's your view, especially for? Yes, especially when we discussing that how technology company. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
No.
Yes, Mr. Frank, actually, we are discussing about like techno-driven solution and how you want to share your experience, especially for some startup, those who are our audience, how they can develop their start like technological techno companies, and what type of thing is important for them to make it successful, and if they want to go to the next level of the business, what is your advice?
Yes, let me move to a slightly different location. Okay, so if you see me moving, please do not get dazed and confused. Um, in order to answer that question, let me go back to something Adam said, which is very, very important, which is the issue of privacy. I would tell these aspirants into the market, or these new startups, that they have to differentiate between what is called uh, voice recognition to what is using voice as a biometric marker, using it as a voice verification in this case. Is a very long gap between these two fields, all right? So voice recognition, we all know what that is, but using this as a biometric marker, that is a long way to go. That would be one of them. The other one is to start with the platforms that we already know about, which is basically Google, Amazon, Microsoft. I think that will be Cortana. The problem with Cortana is that you have to fall into the ecosystem of Microsoft. It's not exactly open source. Um, to start from there, because R&D in terms of voice is going to take some funding out of it. It's very expensive to do this. That would be my recommendation. That's what my experience tells me from working specifically with mobile phones and specifically with smart glasses.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dan.
Yeah, to continue kind of on my last note, I don't want to, harp too much, but, we have these response mechanisms in place for what you might call traditional mundane types of disasters, but we don't really have a civilization-wide emergency response. And I think we should be developing that while we have these tools, because now is the time to get prepared before it's too late to get prepared. But really, any time you have is the right time to take preparedness and resilience steps. I remember the old days of the internet when we had a browser called Lynx and Gopher, and it was a text-based browser. Basically, the web was like a series of multiple choice options where you would choose a selection that would lead you to another window of selections, and there was more relevant and more engaged information. I mean, nowadays the internet is highly bells and whistles. It's highly graphical. In fact, I think 80 or 90% of the packet traffic on the internet is porno. We've built this global brain, and we're using it for very questionable purposes. When we could be using it to create a resilient spacefaring civilization, and to take care of each other, and to do things like make our neighborhoods have food security, and make ourselves have neighborocracy, where we have the Dunbar number of the 150 closest people you can know in a lifetime. Maybe you could actually interact with them on a daily basis. That would be my vision for civilization. Is instead of this ad hoc civilization, we have an intentional civilization where we live in the communities we want to, we're doing the things we want, and things like it may sound like I'm straying off the topic, but Alexa, I'm sorry, A Word Box is a great resource to use this for while we can. So I would just say, get to know your neighbors. Maybe say, hey, I've got an A Word Box and it's in sidewalk mode, and I'm also into sharing, low bandwidth information about resilient neighborhoods. And instead of growing lawns, we could share crop our front lawns for food production. The average, I've said this before, but the average meal on an American's plate travels 1,500 miles to get to that plate. I mean, that's kind of silly. We should, someone said we could be there's a super tanker of biscuits, of going one way on the Atlantic, and a container of biscuits going the other way. And someone said, couldn't we just exchange recipes? Like it's, so I think if we're going to get out of this planetary overshoot condition where we're using more than the resources of one planet, things like neighborhood interaction with the devices we have, like the A Word Box, are going to help us get there. And that's my take on it for now. Thanks for letting me go off on a little bit of a rant there. All right.
To Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. I really liked Mr. Dan's illustration earlier, highlighting the feedback loop where humans develop technologies, and those very same technologies alter our lives, minds, and bodies in some way. Then we develop more tech, and that then has a further influence on our being, and so on and so forth, which was what I was trying to illustrate when I mentioned my use of tech and its effects on the brain and my brain. And when Mr. Frank mentioned Google Glass, as well as his last few comments, I thought that tied in nicely with the issue of privacy, which we touched on earlier. I mentioned this before. I remember one incident, how much controversy Google Glass caused when people first started adopting it and wearing it out in the street, and people were responding to it quite aggressively. I know I said earlier that we should be patient when it comes to new tech being out on the shelves, but being defensive and aggressive in the face of something radical and alien, let's say, is counterproductive unless it's shooting lasers at people. But I remember one story about someone who wore a set of Google glasses and they walked into a fast food joint and people went crazy. They were concerned for their privacy and being captured on video. And yet very soon after that, 99% of people wouldn't think twice about whipping out their smartphones to record some fight in the street, or someone falling over drunk, someone on the receiving end of some humiliating event. And certainly by now, people wouldn't think twice to surround someone and then capture whatever it is that person's doing or what they're being subjected to, like a humiliating event, say, and posting it on the internet for all to see, never to be deleted, well, not properly, not anyway, not truly, unless we get a solar flare or an asteroid. So that is a perfect illustration of how flimsy people's values and priorities can be. And now, how many people who hurled abuse at that person who was wearing Google Glasses that time, how many of them consented to living lifestyles where a smartphone is by now heavily integrated into their lives? And why didn't people get this fired up about CCTV and surveillance cameras? You don't see people climbing up metal poles with a pair of pliers to vandalize CCTV cameras. Because when there is controversy, people get fired up, cool off, cool down, adapt, and normalize to it all, which again makes public outrage seem almost laughable. the fire and rebellious passion of our forefathers 2 or 3 generations back, or even just 1 generation ago, has been put out, and now people are begging to be watched and surveyed and eavesdropped, the kind of Stockholm syndrome. And Mr. Dan mentioned another important topic when he said about technology and innovation being driven by demand for pornography. That is really a bad direction to go in, and we need to question our consumption of it, if not get rid of it and throw it in the historical dustbin completely. So the lack of privacy and pornography are my biggest moral disturbances framed within this discussion. And there are others, but I don't want to go too off topic. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, thank you. This is an excellent discussion, and I'm sure, especially the tech companies, those who regularly follow World Talent Economy Forum, it will be helpful. And we have our world famous speakers from the industry, and hopefully their guideline and their information will be helpful for your development. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. I want to start from Professor David Smith. What's your concluding remarks for today?
The world is getting flatter when it comes to technology. We're seeing technology move very rapidly between geospatial locations. So we're seeing the curves that were there in many places in the past disappear. Language is important. One of the things in software technology, if I go back and look in the last 40 years, is having to do translations between screen images, between all the different languages, and that slowed adoption. With machine learning and natural language processing, and with now the vocal user interfaces, the voice user interfaces, some of those speed constraints in the past are going away because of our ability to use voice commands as opposed to having to do really slow and drawn out textural changes in applications. And so that is going to speed the deployment of technologies across, particularly if I go and look at the smart speaker voice assistant marketplace. And Dan, that's how I get around using the A word, I guess. It's going to do nothing but accelerate. I'm seeing voice almost any place. You know, if you think of most of your tier 1 technical support today, it's being done through voice chat box or through textual chat boxes. And you're going to see that expand across it. Most of the times when I call into an airline reservation system, it is a vocal chat box that I'm interacting to, just as though it was like an Alexa, a Siri, whatever, the Google, in that type of interaction. So, and Frank is right. The IVRs have changed to be more intelligent, more conversational, going away from trees. I can tell you, I don't think this is going to slow down. I think it will speed up as we go forward. If you asked me 5 years ago if I was going to put a smart speaker into a refrigerator, I probably wouldn't. If I'm designing a refrigerator today, I probably would. Just simply because how pervasive it's come to say, how many tablespoons are in this? What is that? Give me this recipe. Set my timer. Set multiple timers. And have it all handle it for you, where you can keep doing what you're doing and interact with it. I can now in my car listen to and respond to text messages without ever having to touch a device. And my dashboard will recognize the interface with my smartphone and do it. So to me, those are part of what's really heading this market down the road, and really will get there. As far as doing it in developing nations, there are so many tools there to do it today that it's very easy. If I even begin to look at some of the tools, the Apache license and others today have tools that I can use open source to develop this type of interface with very little programming, almost drag and drop today. So the opportunities to expand this market, I think, are tremendous.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor David Smith. Mr. Dan.
Yeah, I guess Dr. Prakash had to go, but he did leave a concluding remark. Should I read it that he left in the
Yes,
chat
no problem.
window? Yeah, he says, my concluding remark, quote, "We need to have bot configuration challenges." The BOT is all capitals there. Sponsored ones and a small proof of concept be granted, and we leverage academic interfaces to fine-tune tools further.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that's a great comment because it speaks to a culture of continuous improvement, of quality feedback loops. That's what makes a civilization great, or what makes it a dying civilization. We need to use our resources to have a living, thriving civilization, and we need to walk the line between safety and privacy, and all these challenges that the world presents. One thing that an always-on smart system like the A-word box can do is be used for all kinds of health and safety things. Like I love that Frank mentioned there's a voice detection that can tell if you're progressing into a disease condition. That's an amazing development. There's systems there's a system called Shot Spotter. When a gunshot goes off somewhere, these networks of speakers can triangulate it down to a few meters, and you can have responders on the scene. Well, why can't Alexa do that? When you hear a gunshot or some bang or explosion in your neighborhood, all your neighbors' Alexas, probably heard it too, and they could alert the authorities. Some kinetic event. Similarly, with seismic warning. I'm pretty close to the San Andreas Fault here in Thousand Oaks, California, and when the bottom section of the fault breaks, it's probably going to be down by the Salton Sea, and there will be about those seismic waves. They travel about the speed of sound, so it's kind of like you see the lightning, and then you hear the thunder a few seconds later. That's how earthquakes propagate. So I could actually get like 30 seconds to a minute warning to get under a desk, or stop doing some sensitive life-saving or life-threatening activity. Someone on the top of a ladder. I mean, you wouldn't want to be there when the ground starts heaving up and down, like 2 or 3 feet. So we need to, we have these wonderful technologies, but we're letting them lull us into a sense of dependency, and we're becoming over reliant without becoming resilient. We need to balance the resilience and the reliance factor. So that's my message for Alexa users. There I go again.
Thank you.
And I'd love to hear what Frank's comment was. I think he didn't get to jump in with a comment as in time, but thanks again.
Thank you. Mr. Frank.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you. Well, I just wanted to say that it's a final thought, I guess. First of all, to add to something that has been told about being resilient, I like to use the term anti-fragile. It is a term coined by Professor Nassim Nicholas Taleb at Columbia University in New York. It is quite better than just barely resilient. Okay, so anti-fragile means that you get stronger with by way of having something against you, or being constantly tested. So anti-fragile technology is one of the things we need right now. And also for the message, I guess, for the start, another message for the what's out there is basically that they are going to be using AI and in the field there is this new field called AI ethics. We can talk about that, or if you haven't spoken about this before, but it is called AI ethics, and everybody talks about that AI must be ethical in nature. Yeah, but what kind of an ethics? Because there is not one kind. So, and because there might be a universal touch on this that would be between Aristotle and Confucius, I guess. But let's try to find this common ground. What AI ethics should be all about, or could be all about, because in the end, you're going to have to use this for voice technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. I was just thinking, what's the logical conclusion to Alexa technology or Alexa-esque technology? Is it devices that can read our thoughts eventually? We don't want to end up in a world where I'm thrown into prison for a literal thought crime, or any of us. It's not beyond the realm of possibility, and I appreciate that stating things like this can be a bit facepalm inducing, but slippery slopes are real. I know I don't want to live in a world like that, and then when that happens, how long before the freedom to choose is taken away, where it becomes physically impossible to think any kind of dissenting thoughts? But that is the biggest bad situation when it comes to privacy and being listened in and having our minds read eventually in a few decades potentially, and not having the luxury of freedom of thought and free will. And the book Anti-Fragile is one of my favorite books as well. So it was a pleasure to hear Mr. Frank mention it. And the barbell theory, as outlined in that book, was mind blowing for me. So I can recommend it as a good book to read. Yeah, Nicholas Nassim Taylor is a fascinating and a very charismatic guy. So yeah, that's all I've got to say, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is an excellent discussion. I'm sure the startup and the technology company, those who are our audience, they will understand more. And thank you, our honorable speaker, Professor David Smith, Mr. Dan, Mr. Frank, you joined today. I want to invite you more in World Talent Economy Forum. And Mr. Adam, I want to give you special thanks for your special support for World Talent Economy Forums, and you are a great example for all of us. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Professor David Smith, and thank you, everyone. Bye bye, and take care.
Bye, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.